Alrighty guys, welcome to another Multimaps workflow tutorial with me, Eldrin from Logicel Lemire. And we're going to be continuing from where we left off in part 2 of this tutorial. I decided to break it up into a third part because this is probably going to go on pretty long as we start to discuss some XGen. So, alright guys, so here we are in Maya. This is Maya 2015 that I'm using here. We're going to be using XGen, so I believe Maya 2014 extension 1, I think it is, will work, as that extension included XGen as well. I'm also using Arnold 1.1.1.1. I believe that probably is supported in 2014. Alrighty. So anyway, without further ado, let's go in and let's start to set up our project first of all. So we want to set our project to basically be in the right place. That way all the XGen stuff that gets created will automatically be put into that directory. XGen creates its own custom directory, and it puts certain files, collections, and descriptions in that directory. So we definitely want to have a project set up here in Maya so that that will occur nicely. That being the case, what we want to do is we want to actually put our project in this Maya folder that we created in the first part of this tutorial. But that folder should be empty right now. If we go ahead and go to our directory here, let's go to Testa 2 and let's go to the hair tutorial and let's go to Maya. That directory is empty, so we basically don't have a project yet. So what we're going to want to do is go to our file, and we're going to want to go to the project window, and we're going to want to go ahead and create a new project. We're going to call it Maya, and we're going to save it in we're going to go up here using this little up arrow to go up a few directories, and we're going to go to Testa Hair Tut, and we're just going to save it in this folder here. So cool. It's going to create a folder in this folder called Maya, and it's going to create all these primary default kind of sort of scene locations for us. The defaults are fine, so let's click accept, and what we should see now is that our Maya folder got filled up with stuff. So we've got a assets folder, autosave, cache. This is all basic stuff that Maya uses with some of its tool sets and its scripts to basically write data to. Alright, so that's great. Now that we have a project set up, we can go ahead and actually import some assets into our scene. So actually we don't want to do an import here. What we want to do is we want to actually use the pipeline cache, and we want to use the Olympic cache, and we're going to go ahead and import in an Olympic, and we're going to go up a little bit because we actually don't have our Olympics in the Maya directory. They're actually located on our root directory here. And let's go ahead and grab the body animation and import that in. Alright, so if we hit F, we can go ahead and frame up our whole entire scene, and then we can go ahead and start to zoom in a little bit, and we can kind of sort of start to see what's going on here. So basically got our cubes that we created in Cinema, we've got our character here, and if we start to kind of sort of drag our timeline here in Maya, we can see that she is animating. All that motion that we had on the vibrate tags came in nicely. The chest motion came in, and she's got some basic rocking movement going on here, so you know, she looks like she's alive, which is great. If we hold space here in Maya and go ahead and drag up here in this little kind of sort of crosshair space here, we can bring up our different viewports, and we can basically go to the perspective outliner. And with the perspective outliner open, well, with the perspective view open with the outliner on the side here, we can see all our objects here in a kind of sort of Cinema 4D friendly type way. Let me see, we got the heeled shoes in here, the top, the skirt, the mesh, the hair cap that we're going to use to add our XGen description to. our plane, and our two cubes that kind of give us some reference in the scene. Excellent. We have also got our camera, which we can go into panels here, and we can actually switch to our scene cam. And now we've got a perfect replica cam in here of the same camera that we had in cinema, which is great for compositing purposes. If we decide that we want to render stuff out of cinema and then add that to our scene as well via After Effects or Nuke, then we've got two cameras that match in both programs, and we're able to easily do that compositing, which is amazing. So we're going to go ahead and save this scene here, just in case Maya crashes, because these 3D programs like to crash sometimes, or you might need to restart the scene. So as you can see, the scenes directory that it actually jumps to happens to be the scene directory that's located under the project that we set. So this is why it's very important that you set your project in Maya, because everything defaults kind of sort of to that location, which is amazing. It's probably one of the first things you're going to want to do in Maya when setting stuff up. So we're going to call this test hair tut, for lack of a better name, and there we go. And we'll save it as Maya ASCII there, MA. You can see in the script editor it kind of sort of came up. That way, as I've been told, in case you need to edit your scene files or make a small little change to allow them to open up in new versions or older versions or something like that, they're human readable, and it's a little bit easier to get at it. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and import in our hair. So we save that as an FBX. So let's go ahead and import that in, and let's see if it came in fine, and it looks like it did. Alright, so we've got basically a static hairstyle here. That's all of our splines, nicely broken out. We can go ahead and select all of them and do a Control G, which will group them together, and we can call that maybe static hair or something along those lines. And there we go. Now they're all nicely grouped together in our scene. Excellent. So now we're ready for XGen. So let's go ahead and save our scene. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the XGen tab here in our shelf palette here, and we're going to go ahead and open up the XGen window. That's going to go ahead and dock the XGen window automatically for us here, where our attribute editor and our channel editor are. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a new description. So right now we don't have any sort of collection or description yet. We need to, of course, select a polygon object that we want the XGen guides or primitives to grow off of. So let's select our hair cap first, and then let's create a new description. And this window is going to come up to allow us to create a new description. We're going to go ahead and call this testa hair DESC for testa hair description, and we're going to put in a new collection called the Testa collection. So the way XGen works is there's a collection for typically a scene or a character that defines like kind of sort of the whole XGen kind of sort of system, and then there is descriptions for each individual element. So we could have say the grass, we could have primitives that are going to be on this plane down here, and those primitives might be another description. Alright, for hair though, what we're going to want to do with this description is we're going to want to go ahead and use splines, and we're going to want to do it at points that we specify. So we're going to want to be able to paint those guides, or basically create our own guides, and we're going to want to control the primitives by placing and shaping guides. These are all very important options. XGen allows you to basically use certain attributes and modifiers to basically control primitives if you're trying to generate, say, maybe card-based trees, You might, have them face the camera all the time as the camera moves, and then you might place them randomly across the surface, like so here. And then you might use cards here, which would be like flat textures and stuff like that, to basically place those trees on the scene. And that cuts down on your render time, allows you to have some really quick trees. And then XGen manages the primitive generation. I liken XGen it's kind of similar to Cinema 4D's MoGraph system in that sense, that it allows you to basically be able to place like multiple different primitive objects, instances of objects across a surface or across a different type of geometry. So it's kind of like a low-level kind of sort of MoGraph. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, let's go ahead and create this. And what's going to happen is now we have basically an XGen description, and we've got a few tabs here that we can work with. This right here, this little eye, is basically going to allow us to preview our XGen primitives as they go across our geometry here, basically interpolated between geometry. The preview output section is going to allow us to change some parameters about how these actually get created and output and different things. The modifiers basically allow us to add new modifiers to control the guides. So we can basically use like a Maya hair system in here, using the nucleus hair system or something like that, and then we can use the anim wires to basically drive each XGen guide that we placed based on that. And then there's a bunch of other systems in here. Grooming tools will allow us to basically be able to sculpt and groom our splines just like we did in Cinema 4D with its grooming tools. And that will only work if we set up our primitive type to like groomable splines basically, and we said that we wanted to control that stuff with grooming. Which can be very useful for like really quickly creating beards and stuff. It just basically creates primitives for you and allows you to quickly and easily be able to sculpt that stuff. Our utilities are kind of fun. We're actually going to go ahead and use the utilities right now. So what we want to do actually is we want to grab all of our splines. So we just want to grab our group basically. And just for good measure, I'm actually going to grab the splines individually instead of grabbing the group. Although I do believe grabbing the group itself will actually work. But just to be on the safe side, we're going to grab all the hairs. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually take the curves to guides utility, and we're going to convert all these curves that we created in Cinema 4D into XGen guides. So with the default set up, with the exception of delete curves, I do not want to delete my original curves. I might need them again for whatever reason. Let's go ahead and add guides, and that's going to add some XGen guides to the scene based on the curves that we have. So let's go ahead and do a Control H. That's going to go ahead and hide our original guides here, and that's just going to leave us with the XGen guides, which actually I think we'll do a Shift H because I think I hit the collection by accident. And let's hide the guides, the original guides. So now the original guides are hidden, and now we've got just the collection here. So great. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to go to randomly across surface so that it'll generate primitives across the surface based on our guides. And we want to actually control the density here, and the density is basically control how many primitives are generated based on those guides. So the more density you have, basically the more primitives you're going to have generated across your surface. So as you can see, we're starting to get primitives now. All right. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to make these primitives a little bit smoother. So let's go ahead and change the CV count to about 12 so it matches the CV count that we had in Cinema 4D. And that's going to give us a much smoother hairstyle, as you can see here. So now we're really starting to get some really nice generation here. Alright, we can control the taper of the hair a little bit. So as we start to bring the taper up, our hair begins to like sort of fatten at the it's fat at the tip, and then it gets thinner as it goes down. And then we can control the taper start, so we can control where that taper starts to happen. So that's kind of cool. And then I think, yeah, we want to leave the length alone. We don't really want to mess with that. We do want to mess with the width. The width is going to control how thick the hairs are. So if we make this 0.01, what's going to happen is we're going to get like really thin hair, which would be more physically accurate when you're talking about having like typical human hair has about like 100,000 or more hairs, individual hairs. So to get kind of sort of a really more realistic look, you're going to want to increase probably the density a little bit more, and then you're going to want to make the hairs a lot thinner, and that's going to give you that look that you would be used to. Alright, we're going to start to take some renders here real quick though, so that we can start to kind of sort of see how this is actually really shaping up for us as far as the scene is concerned. So to do that, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to click on this little icon with the two dots here. It's basically going to bring up your render settings. Let's go ahead and change our render to Arnold here. And then, yeah, by default, Arnold uses EXR right off the break, so we don't even need to worry about that. As for our format here, let's go ahead and do a name underscore number extension here. That's the typical naming convention I really like for my rendering. As for the file name prefix, I guess we can stick with the scene name, that's fine. The frame range to render, we can go into Cinema 4D actually. Go ahead and look that one up. So I'm going to reopen up Cinema 4D here. And we're not going to send that report. Guess the last time I was using it, it crashed out on me. But let's go to our test of hair here. And this actually, I believe, might be, this may be my version. Let me just make sure. Nope, that's the test of hair tut. Okay, so this is the version that we worked on. All right, and it's loading up, but I believe 112 is going to be our animation timeline. So here we can set our in frame to 112, and Maya defaults to 24 frames per second, if I'm not mistaken. So keep that there. We'll go ahead and change this parameter here on our timeline to also be 112, so that, well, this parameter here actually. So this little one right here, guys, will allow us to set our end time. So we want to set that to 112. We want to set this beginning time to 0 because in Cinema our timelines actually begin at 0. So we want to make sure we have that at 0. Awesome. All right. Let's see. Let's go ahead and save again. Just want to regularly save. You know, these programs have crashed on me so many times. I don't really play around with them much anymore. Now, as far as Arnold materials are concerned, if we go ahead and go into our window, go into our rendering editors, and go into our Hypershade, what we can do is we can create a Arnold AI hair material. And what we want to do is we actually want to go ahead and select the description and we want to apply the AI hair material to that. So we can right click on the AI hair material. Here we can actually hold our right mouse button, and we can go ahead and assign the material to the selection. And now we've basically applied our Arnold hair shader to the material. Now the other thing that we're going to want to do with Arnold here is we're also going to want to go ahead and create a area light, and with that area light created, we're going to want to go in here, grab our move tools, and just basically want to move that light up and move it back a little bit, and we're going to want to start to set this light up. So let's go ahead and get out of XGen here and move over to our attribute editor. Let's go to our area light shape tab here, and we're just going to go ahead and let's actually go to the area light shape, or area light translate node here basically. Let's go ahead and scale this baby up a little bit to give us a bigger area light here, and we're basically going to go ahead and move that this way, you know, and this is basically going to be our key light. I'm not going to really create a 3-point light setup yet. I just kind of sort of want to get like one light in here basically. And then we can go in here to our Arnold light attributes. Let's up the samples just a little bit so we get some shadow, so we get some clean shadows here. All the defaults are pretty good for the most part with Arnold. Arnold is a physically plausible renderer, so by default, for the most part, Arnold settings are set to generate a real-world kind of sort of photorealistic result. So quadratic decay is basically kind of sort of a fall off of lights. As a light gets further, as you get further away from a light, the light's intensity becomes dimmer in a quadratic kind of sort of exponential fashion. So that default, we don't really need to change that. We can change the intensity of the light or the exposure of the light to give us a little bit more light. So I prefer to change the exposure. I find that that gives better results. Usually a little bit more, it's a little bit more physically accurate, I think, to use the exposure than it is to use the intensity. Honestly, the intensity is a Maya standard kind of sort of attribute there. Alright, so we're almost done here. Let's go into our Hypershade again. So Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And let's go ahead and select that material. Let's go ahead and minimize the Hypershade just a little bit to give ourselves just a little bit more space to work with our material here. We're going to go ahead and set the root color to a brown a little bit, like a deeper brown, and then we're going to set the tip color to a brighter brown, give or take. So something like about there. And that's going to give us a nice color to look at. Alright, we can just minimize the Hypershade. We're probably going to need that later. And I believe that is just about everything we need to set up to go ahead and get our render going. In our render settings, if we go into Arnold real quick, we can see that we've got our samples here. And this is what's really amazing about Arnold a little bit, is the fact that this is all you need to worry about with Arnold. So there's no GI, there's no ambient occlusion per se, there's no crazy render settings like there is in Cinema. Pretty much everything is either operated through the lights and through the materials, or it's just operated through just these 5 parameters here. So the biggest parameter here is, of course, the AA in Arnold. This is your anti-aliasing. And as you increase this parameter, if I increase it to 10, you'll notice up here that some things changed. So The AA is basically a squared value. Whatever you type in here is squared here, so 10 times 10 is basically 100. And then this value is actually a part of the calculations for all these other values. So as you increase the AA samples, you basically increase the samples of every single other parameter in Arnold. Now, every other parameter is also squared, so the diffuse samples is basically 4 right now, glossy is 4, refraction's 4, and SS is 9. But at the same time, these are also being multiplied by whatever the AA's samples are. So basically, this is it's going to be 4 times 100, which is going to give you 400, which is what this number does. So bearing that in mind, you basically want to keep these values as low as you need them to kind of sort of go, and then you kind of sort of, if your picture still looks grainy, then you basically, once you have these where you think they need to be, then you just increase the AA samples until you just remove just the rest of the grain, basically. The diffuse is basically your color samples. This controls your global illumination. So by default, Arnold global illumination just works in Arnold. It's just the way that Arnold calculates out its rays and the way it calculates out the scene. It calculates the GI as it's operating, and it all happens through this diffuse. So the more samples you have here, basically kind of sort of brighter and cleaner the scene gets. Some of these parameters down here also have something to do with that as well. But for the most part, this is kind of how clean your basic color GI is gonna kind of sort of be. The glossy is like all of your reflections. So that's your specular reflections and your regular reflections. And Arnold works in kind of sort of a physically plausible kind of sort of way, because the specular reflections actually are real reflections. They're glossy reflections. So basically, the specular channel manages not only reflections but specular as well. There's like no real fake specular in Arnold. Refraction manages your refraction, so any light bending that might happen through water or through glass and different things is your refraction pass. And then your SS is your subsurface scattering, so that's anything that has light bouncing around in it. So that's going to be your skin, your milk, your chocolate, food, different things like that, organic stuff that where light penetrates it slightly, bounces, and then comes out. And then the volume indirect I'm not entirely sure about, so probably make another tutorial on that one. All right, and then that's pretty much it for here. The rest of these aren't entirely too important to what we're doing for this tutorial. The AOVs come into play when you're trying to do multipass rendering. AOVs are basically just multipasses, is all they are. So multipass is AOV, same exact thing, just a different way of saying it. But yeah, we basically want to put our AAs at, we can put them at about 2. We can basically take all these down to 1. I don't even think we're actually using any SS in this scene, so we can take that down to 0. And we're going to get a really quick render with these settings. So let's close, and let's go ahead and render, and let's see if it's working okay. And okay, so it rendered on my other screen, and looks like the render is done. It went pretty fast. Looks like it only took 8 seconds. But one thing that I'm noticing already is that we don't have enough light. So let's go ahead and increase the amount of light here. So we can go to our Arnold light, and we can basically increase the exposure to about 5 here. Open up our render view again and click on this little clapboard and re-render the scene. And yeah, So we're getting that. We can go ahead and bring this up to about 10. And I could bring the light closer to her, perhaps, and that might help with the overall lighting. But okay, so we're getting kind of a bad hair day here, it looks like, for her right now. But overall, at least it's kind of sort of coming together. Alright, so let's see why we're getting a bad hair day. Let's go to frame 5 and let's re-render this and see if we're still getting... Nope. Here we go. Alright, it's already starting to look good. You can already kind of sort of see that with just the default settings, with just one shader, a little bit of play on the light and all that, you're already getting an extremely beautiful render out of Arnold. And this is what I really like about it. Setting this up in Cinema 4D wouldn't be too difficult. As far as the hair system in Cinema 4D, it's incredibly difficult. Not incredibly difficult, but it's very tedious back and forth kind of sort of rendering to get a result that, you know, looks like this, if you get a result that looks like this in Cinema. Now, R16 has a new bi-render engine that seems to work a lot better and a lot faster, but still like a formula, like a kind of sort of occult formula to like get the hair to kind of sort of look halfway decent. But here in Arnold, it's 6 seconds to render and it already looks incredible. All we need to do at this point would be to increase maybe the AAs and possibly the diffuse samples, maybe even increase the glossy and the refraction. We don't have any refraction in the scene, if I'm not mistaken, so leave that down, and if we were to re-render this, we would pretty much get a pretty decent looking shot. As you can see, it's taking significantly longer now. Not significantly, I won't say that. It's taking a pretty reasonable amount of time. This is about the time I would expect. It's about the time it took in R15, R14 to render hair, and it didn't even look half as good as this. So, probably about 30 seconds to render here, I'd imagine. Let's see what we come up with. Yeah, 35 seconds, which is under a minute, which is, you know, exceptional render times. And we probably wouldn't get too much of an increase. I've rendered out scenes that had had color and different things in Arnold, and you know, the boost in time just isn't really that significant at all. I'd say probably about 45 or 50 seconds with this at 720p. You know, this resolution that we have right here is actually a pretty decent size resolution as well, and you know, we're still getting extremely fast render times. I love this about Arnold. So anyway, that's pretty much it at this point. As far as just the basic setup, if we had a static hairstyle, we'd pretty much be done with XGen, and at this point you could just go ahead and add materials to the rest of her body and kind of sort of color it up. However, we want to add animation to this scene, so we have to do just a little bit more. Alright, so what we want to do now is we want to go into our XGen tab here, and we want to go ahead and take advantage of that limit cache that we generated out earlier in Cinema 4D. So we generated out a hair cache, a hair alembic that basically had the animated version of all of our guides. So if we turn off live mode here, which live mode will allow you to use a Maya hair system to basically drive the hair live. If we turn that off and we go ahead and point this alembic, this cache file name dialog, if we go ahead and point it at the alembic that we created in Cinema, so it's going to be our hair anim ABC file here. it's now going to use our hair cache to drive the guides from XGen. So as we start to kind of sort of move our timeline around and just jump back and forth here, we're going to see that now the XGen guides are basically updating based on our guide hair movement. Nice. And if we were to render this scene out now, so we can just click on the little clapperboard up here and render this out, we should see a different look for the hair. Should see that it came down just a little bit. Okay, and it's finished. And as we can see, we've got a different state here of the hair, and yeah, Arnold was doing a pretty bang-up job of it. And thinning that hair out earlier, so it's given us these really nice filamentous kind of sort of strands, which is really, really, really awesome. All right. So let's see. All right, so that's pretty much it. Now, in order to actually render this and get it out to your compositing package of choice, you're going to need to do just a few things that are a little bit different than you may or may not be accustomed to in Maya. I don't know how familiar you are with Maya, but what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to File, and we're going to want to export out our patches for batch render. It's one of the first things that we're going to want to do. We're going to want to make this animated, and 112 is our final frame of animation, and we're going to go ahead and export that out. And basically what exporting the patches does is it generates out an alembic file behind the scenes for the geometry that the hairs are basically attached to. Our geometry that we already have our hairs attached to is like already an alembic file though, so I don't know the specifics of why this needs to do what it needs to do, but in the Maya manuals this is what they recommend, and I had issues rendering the hair without this being set up. Alright, so I'll come back when that's done. Alrighty, and so that caching is done now. And that's pretty much it. Now, when I was originally doing this, I ran into quite a few issues with trying to get this to batch render out of Maya and get, you know, clean animation out of here without having to constantly go back to the render menu and render out the scenes. And I couldn't quite figure out why I wasn't able to get a batch render of animated XGen guides going. And the answer was that exporting out the patches for batch render is what you need to do. And then you also, of course, need to use animation and make sure that you have the correct guide animation file set up here. And then the other thing, of course, was that little pitfall that I was talking about at the beginning of the tutorial. The fact that for some particular reason, if you go ahead and try to export patches, if your file name or your directory name, if this path has any spaces in it, it's going to break, and you're not going to be able to actually export out those patches. And you're not going to be able to get that batch render. All right, so that is the one big pitfall. Just make sure you have no spaces in your path at all. All right, so with that set up, you'll notice that XGen actually wasn't rendering what we were seeing in the viewport, or rather Arnold wasn't rendering what we were seeing in the viewport. It's actually rendering out our scene camera for us, and that's set up in our render settings right here under common. So the renderable camera is the scene cam, and we can go ahead and actually get rid of the well, we could keep the perspective camera, but I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. I don't really want the perspective camera to be rendered. We could up our image size if we wanted to, but I'm going to leave it at 540 just so we can get some, you know, fast renders going here. And we're going to go ahead and render out a few frames of this. So let's go ahead and well, actually, let's go ahead and render out the whole thing, and I'll just meet you back on the other side. So to go ahead and spit these out, all we got to do is just make sure everything is kind of sort of good here. I've been caught with Arnold before, especially when I up the resolution manually. I've been caught with the pixel aspect ratio here being something other than 1. You want to make sure that your aspect ratio is square pixels. That kind of bit me in the butt a little bit one time. The start frame, you want it to be 0. So we want to make sure we do that. It can step by a frame of 1. Yeah, I can render the master layer and all that kind of stuff is good. Alright, and then we just want to go to render, and we just want to go to batch render. And there are no batch render settings for Arnold, so we can just hit the batch render and it's going to go ahead and just render out for us. Let's also check and just make sure that we're rendering this out to where we want to render it out to. There's actually no setting for that like in Cinema 4D. This batch render is actually going to render out to your Maya folder under images, and it's going to render to a folder called master layer. It's going to be whatever your render layer is called. The temporary renders are going to actually render out to the ones that come out in the viewport. They're going to actually render out to the temp file, temp folder. And there you go. There's your respective camera renders, and there's the multiple renders that we did there. All right. And then, as you can see, we're getting hair tut. I'm not sure what this 5612 is, but we're getting the 00, and everything's good. So it's rendering out to our images directory. It actually looks like it's rendering out directly to it. And I guess this is because I don't actually have like a actual real render pass going here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video, let this render out a few frames, and then we'll see how it's actually looking. Alrighty guys, we're back. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel the batch render, just so we can get some of our processor power back a little bit. Let's go into our preview and output, and let's actually change a few settings for XGen, because I realized I didn't go into my preview and output and actually change some of the settings in here that might be important for XGen as well. For one, we definitely want to set our XGen renderer to be Arnold. Number 2, we want to set the primitive bound, so we can go ahead and auto set that, and it'll automatically go ahead and set that for us. I think that's just like the it's kind of like a hidden invisible kind of sort of bounds that like all the primitives kind of sort of get drawn in or something like that. Not quite sure on that on what that option actually specifically does. I just know that typically it gets auto set. Let's see, so Arnold as the renderer, and then in the render mode we definitely want to set this to batch render so that it batch renders. I believe Arnold automatically internally turns this setting to batch render if you do a batch render. It can't render XGen stuff live when it batch renders anyway. And those are, I believe, most of the critical settings for Arnold. So we're going to go ahead and save our scene out, but I've opened up After Effects here while we're waiting, and basically what we want to do is go into our documents, go into Testa 2, we're going to go to the hair tutorial, we're going to go to Maya, and then we basically want to go to our images, and we can just go ahead and select this image. It's first EXR, and we can make sure that Open EXR Sequence is checked. That way this gets brought into After Effects as footage. We'll go ahead and import that in, and we can go ahead and drag this onto our comp button here to automatically have it kind of sort of get added to our comp. And we have our scene here. Now it looks like Arnold did a pretty okay job of rendering out the scene overall, even without all those settings set to the right kind of sort of settings, which is really awesome. But our scene's a little dark, and this is because EXRs are typically rendered out with a linear workflow. So the gamma for the EXR is going to be 1.0, and then After Effects is taking that 1.0 and then I guess subtracting 2.2 from it, or doing something to it at 2.2 to basically make it dimmer than it should be. Now there's two ways we can fix this. One way, of course, is to go into the project settings, go into a working space, and basically change our working space to sRGB, and then linearize the workspace, and that'll basically give us the look that we're going for. The way I like to do it with EXRs, though, because linearized workspace means that the whole entire workspace gets linearized, and I found a neat effect called the color profile converter here in After Effects, which is this is a default effect built into After Effects. And basically, you can linearize per piece of footage with this. So if you linearize the input profile, that's going to go ahead and brighten up the footage and give you the look that you would expect from Maya. So this is our image as it came from Maya, which is really awesome. We're going to want to go ahead and change our color to either 16 or 32 bits per channel, since we've got these really high dynamic range images that came out thanks to EXR. So those are going to be 32-bit / 16-bit images that are coming out of EXR. So it's going to give us a lot of color range and allow us to be able to do a lot of cool stuff with the adjustment layers, as far as pushing the curves really hard and doing different things with levels. It also gets rid of some of that gradation that we had in the back of the scene there. So between that and the color profile converter, we're starting to get an image that's looking pretty decent. And so this is basically After Effects. Right now what we're seeing is that our hair is not animating. And this is what I was kind of afraid of. So that might partially be due to the Arnold settings being set to live instead of set to batch render. It might also be partially due to the fact that the renderer for XGen was also set to Mental Ray instead of Arnold. So what I'm going to go ahead is I'm going to go ahead and go into the render here, and I'm going to go ahead and push another batch render, and I'm going to wait for a few frames to spit out, and we're going to see what we get. So I'll meet you guys back after that's done. Alrighty, and so we're back here in After Effects again, and this is a new render, and I've let it render out a couple of frames. It looks like about 6 or so frames rendered out, and we've got animation going here. So we're looking pretty good here as far as Arnold is concerned. Now a few other things we can do here in Arnold, just to finish out the tutorial here. If we go ahead and open up our render view, we can go ahead and start an IPR render of either the perspective or the scene camera. It's preferable to do it in the perspective camera. And what we can do now is, with this render view open, we can actually go ahead and start to rotate around our scene here, and as we do so, our IPR render will update. Interestingly enough, the new renderer that I've been kind of sort of alluding to in a couple of my other tutorials, that really got me excited, Isotropics, Clarice, has this functionality built directly into the program. In Isotropics, when you render things, the render view and the work view are both one and the same. Isotropics renders basically your final image, and it renders it very, very, very fast, like about as fast as Arnold seems to be doing it here. Except it actually renders out just a little bit faster in Isotropics. and it pretty much gives you a beautiful looking render just like this, and it's all real time. I'll be doing a few Isotropics tutorials to show off some of the new functionality of this really amazing new compositing 3D program that's hit the scene. It's been out for about 2 years. A lot of people don't really know about it, but it's got an incredibly powerful ray tracer, and it allows you to do some really nice look development and lighting very quickly. That being said, I do like the controllability that I get with my scenes in Arnold, and Isotropics has an incredibly easy to use renderer as far as the settings is concerned too. It's just that everything kind of sort of has to be a limit into it, so sometimes it can be interesting to get things in there. However, the great thing about Isotropics is with the new 2.0 that's coming out sometime in this in Q4 here, you're going to be able to render just about everything in there. Volumetrics will be able to be rendered in there. You can already render hair in there, and it comes out looking pretty much the same as it looks here in Arnold. Very beautiful hair, very quickly. Not quite as directable, although I'm still kind of sort of learning the system, so see if I can get my hair as as nice as I can get it in here in Isotropics. But the hair that comes out of Isotropics does look very gorgeous, and the fact that you'll be able to render out fire and explosions and clouds and different things in there with 2.0, as well as a number of other features with it, and the fact that it's kind of sort of like a really innovative, revolutionary new kind of sort of compositing package too. There is a lot with that program that really makes it amazing. But what we can do is we can come in here with our Hypershade here and click on our AI hair material here. Go to our attribute editor, and we can just really quickly do some really nice lighting and look dev type stuff here. Same kind of stuff we would be able to do in Isotropics. Go ahead and start to change like the root color, and as we change it here in our shader, it automatically changes in Arnold as well and gives us a real quick preview. With a faster CPU, obviously you could get a faster preview of things. I think a lot of the washout on our hair here is being due to the specular, but you can see that we are starting to get a different hair color here as far as the tips and the roots are concerned. So that's really good. And I've also been hearing that RenderMan, not only is RenderMan going to be free for non-commercial use, so a lot of us independent freelancers and hobbyists will be able to actually be able to get our hands on what used to be the industry's premier renderer. Not only will we be able to get our hands on it for free and be able to create projects with it, but it also is coming with like an IPR like this as well, and this seems to be where a lot of renders are going with these IPRs that allow you to really see what you're doing in real time fast, and quickly be able to make alliterative changes and get your look development going very quickly. But okay guys, look forward to more lighting and look dev tutorials like this coming soon. I'm going to be going into hopefully more of a weekly, or maybe even hopefully, I won't make any promises, but trying to go into more of a weekly kind of sort of thing. I'm going to start to do a lot more small projects where I kind of sort of start to put together skits, and then I pretty much show how I kind of put the skits together. So it'll be pretty much like a kind of sort of project based tutorial every week is what I'm starting to try to kind of sort of do. what's been holding me up is really just, you know, trying to make it a little bit easier to work in Cinema 4D, and that was primarily the Genesis rig system and the weighting plugin were the two main things that I've been working on in a major way to try to make that all easier. Definitely going to go into more stuff about XGen and Arnold, as long as it's not in Cinema 4D, and we're expecting a plugin for Cinema 4D hopefully before the end of this year. So but this is currently my favorite renderer right now, so this is probably where I'm going to be rendering all of my animated projects, because of its ease of use and the ability to get some really directable kind of sort of results out of this. As soon as it gets to Cinema 4D, I'll definitely be updating the channel with some tutorials on how to use it there, and probably be completely back in Cinema 4D at that point. But alright guys, it's been a pleasure with this one, and hope to see you guys with another tutorial very soon. Bye.